What is up, guys? Welcome to part 2 of a rope lat cable pullover, cable rope lat pullover, lat rope, whatever. You guys got the idea. So anyway, coming into how do we actually perform this exercise, I'm gonna do something different. I'm gonna show you a few reps and then I'm gonna jibba jabba. So you can just watch, and if you have a good photographic processing learning capability, then you don't have to listen to me talk for another 5 minutes. So again, if you didn't see part 1, go back and watch that. A little bit of a forward lean. I'm going to check my top range of motion. I want to be just short of bottoming out, so walk backwards just a little bit. Neutralist spine, trying to keep my body locked in stone. And while keeping my body still, as I come to the top, I'm really reaching with my arms and my shoulder blades. Shoulder blades elevate and protract. Hard contraction of the lat. Shoulder blades are going to start to depress, retract slightly, and that upper arm is going to flex and squeeze that lat in at the side. So again, one of the big things with the form there is knowing what we did with the setup. So get yourself in a good position where your hips are still, your torso and your spine and your rib cage shouldn't move pretty much at all throughout the exercise. You don't want any of this occurring. You don't want any of this occurring. So if you can keep the stuff still that's supposed to be still, you'll be better off than probably 90% of people in the gym. Now, there can be a time and a place for some controlled hip flexion and extension if you have a goal for it, but that'll have to be in video 3, so I'll get into that in just a little bit. But aside from that, what are the moving parts and what do we want moving? Again, I'm going to nerd on this one a little bit further in number 3, but technically, or some people that want to sound smart, everyone talks about your lats basically, as a shoulder extensor. And so again, yes, if we're talking purely the GH joint, they can extend your shoulder joint. But then some people go a step further that are nerds and say, well, technically it's a biarticular joint because it not only crosses over that GH joint, so from your upper arm to somewhere across that joint, but it technically crosses over your GH joint and your scapulothoracic joint. So some people say it's a biarticular joint because it can be involved in shoulder extension and it can be involved in scapular motion, particularly in some positions, depression. But technically, if you want to be a super nerd, the lat actually crosses over a lot of your vertebrae as well too. So technically it could be a crossover like 10 joints, a decaticular joint. Is that a thing? You heard it here first. That doesn't sound cool. But if you want to be a super nerd, next time somebody tells you that a lat is a biarticular joint, to sound smart and say words like biarticular, you can tell them it's a decaarticular, octaarticular. I don't know how many vertebrae crosses over. A lot of them. There's a lot in there. But anyway, that whole mess aside, which I'll nerd a little further in the next video, it is important especially to know, as far as lat training goes, there may be a time and place for a little bit of spinal motion. So there may be a time and a place where lats can have a little bit of influence over things like side bending, over even rotation. But for the most part, there's other muscles that are a little bit better at that. That'll be another video. So anytime you're doing 2 arms for sure, so if you're going both arms at the same time, you're definitely not concerned about what your spine can do because both sides would kind of negate the ability to do that anyway. You can't, if this is side bend, obviously you can't side bend both ways at the same time unless you're strong enough and you rip your entire body in half, in which case you win. You don't need this video anyway. But anyway, back to things that actually make sense. We're going to talk about what the lat does as far as its ability to influence the shoulder joint, so the GH joint, which I mean is your upper arm, glenohumeral joint, your humerus sticking right in the side of your scapula, and then also what the lat can do with the scapula. And so I'd like to keep this as simple as possible, hopefully give you guys some decent visuals, and then let you kind of feel it out from there. So again, I'm going to demonstrate one more time at the very end, but you guys kind of already saw me do it. But if you can hopefully see, I should have wore a different color shirt, and I should have brought somebody with bigger lats than me, but hopefully you can kind of see the line of my lat here. So again, sometimes just seeing where the lat is, simplifying things and realizing that muscles basically pull from origin to insertion, and you just imagine a string, and if that string pulls, what's going to move? So again, if I'm in this position here, particularly if I'm in the start of where I want basically the end range of motion for my lat pullover, which is going to be right around here, I'm going to get into the nerd video part 3, why you wouldn't want it here and why you probably want it just somewhere around here. But if you can see my lat line, again, if you just imagine this as a string and pulling, what's it going to move as soon as it pulls from the stretch position? So when I'm here at the end of the range of motion, not only are you shoulder flexed, but you should let your scapula elevate and even protract to a certain degree. When I'm in this position, again, this will be a little bit more of the nerd video, Your lat actually has the best ability to pull your entire humerus and your scapula down. It actually doesn't have as much of an advantageous mechanical position to do shoulder extension yet. It can, but basically as you start to go through range of motion, it gets more and more of an ability to work right against that load and work as a good shoulder extensor. Where right from the top and the direction the load's pulling right in opposition of that load is going to be much more shoulder depression. Again, it's not directly pulling your scapula down. It may have some attachment points on the scapula, but that's for a separate video as well too. But as far as its main insertion point in the humerus, if you pull your entire humerus down, your humerus attaches to the side of the scapula is going to come along for the ride as well too. So that's really how you want to initiate this motion. Again, if I'm in this position, I'm here, let me grab onto 2 just so hopefully you can see. Again, just imagine this line, this string of a lat all the way down kind of towards my hips. If I'm going through the top of the motion, and again, I have that a little bit of protraction, a lot of elevation occurring, the most contraction that occur, the most length change that will occur first is basically my entire humerus and scapula pulling down. And then as I continue the motion, again, that lat gains function as a shoulder extensor and can pull right into that end position there. So whatever just lets you help feel this lengthening and stretching, and just imagine that lat contracting hard, pulling down towards your hips. That's always a great end target in my opinion. Again, especially those lower lat fibers attached down more towards kind of the base of your hips. They share some fascia down there with some other stuff. So when you're going through, that's my thought process at the top. Contract the lat hard, let it pull your entire shoulder complex down, humerus, scapula comes along for the ride. And as you come into the finish, again, a big thing on this one is finishing, smashing in at the side. Realize again, if you can see where my lat is, my lat can't pull back here because there's no lat back there. The only thing that can pull back here is my rear delt. My lat basically starts to wrap around my rib cage as it comes to the back of me. So when I'm finishing this, I'm basically just smashing my tricep into my lat itself. And that's where basically that contraction ends and fully shortens. If I continue back as far as I can, basically that motion is going to finish just with rear delt. Technically, the lat can actually start to lengthen again if you extend your arm too far behind you. So that's technically why the lat isn't always just a pure shoulder extension. That's why people that are anatomy nerds like, oh, it's a shoulder extensor. So anytime shoulder extension is occurring, it has to be lat because it's written in an anatomy book somewhere. Or again, if you can just simplify it down to how those strings pull, you'd see that again, there's nothing to pull back this way except that rear delt up there. So putting all that again together one more time at the end, I like my form once you have your body position set as you're coming through the end of the eccentric, and the end range is the most important for every exercise not to mess up. Allow for elevation and a degree of protraction, which will get the most length change, the most stretch out of the lat. Keep your upper arm right in line here. So again, we're never letting things flare. We're keeping the upper arm basically right in line with the rope. Contract that lat hard, which will pull the upper arm down, in turn, pull the shoulder blades down, and then continue to extend the upper arm, smashing that tricep into the lat at the side. And this should be a great position to feel the lat a lot. So muscles have a certain feel in their fully shortened, fully contracted position. So that's another advantage of the exercise. If you have a hard time feeling your lats, not that that feeling is that important of itself, this can be a cool place to actually feel, oh, did I actually finish this with the lat? And that's a big thing for any exercise. If you start with the right muscle, if you finish with the right muscle, it's very hard to mess up in between. So one last time going through it, all things real quick. The setup is already there. You got a little bit of a forward lean. You're as close as you can get underneath that cable without it actually bottoming out. To end the eccentric, you're going to finish with a lot of protraction, a little bit of elevation, keeping that lat tight, the joint nice and tight and stable. Contract the lat hard, which will pull the humerus down, entire shoulder complex down, and then finish smashing that upper arm in at the side. And then same as every other exercise, once you get that form down, once you have good control, you got to take it for a ride. So you can't have this nice, neat, clean, pretty squeezy thing all the time. You eventually have to progress it over time, show something quantitative. Otherwise, again, you just can't say this week I was squeezy, next week I was super squeezy, the week after that I was squeezy, times squeezy. I mean, you can write that down if you want, but you won't get any bigger. So master form, standardized form, and then from there, same as everything, you got to track, progress over a period of time, assuming your recovery. So that is it for the lat, rope, cable, pullover execution. If you found this helpful, please do the YouTube thing, like, subscribe, share with some friends, and come back for some nerd stuff on part 3.